What is truth? One thing I'll start with is a truth for me, and that is, what on earth was I thinking talking about what is truth in under 20 minutes? But let the question hang in the air for a moment. What is truth? Truth with a small t, not a capital T. It's the question of the heart of the story we read today that is usually read on Good Friday. The famous dialogue between Jesus and Pilate, two people which come alive in our religious imagination whenever we hear their names. This uncommon encounter between these two is found in all four Gospels, and all tell it from their particular perspective. All four Gospels have Pilate saying to Jesus, "Are you the King of the Jews?" Now in Matthew's Gospel, a character is added. Pilate's wife is added. She comes to Pilate and says, "Have nothing to do. This man is innocent. Let him go. I had a dream. Nothing good will come of this." And even those unfamiliar with the biblical text often quote Pilate by saying, "I wash my hands of this." That's where that quote or idiom comes from. I wash my hands. Pilate wanted nothing to do with it. In Mark, Jesus says absolutely nothing as Pilate peppers him with questions. In the Gospel of Luke, Luke has Jesus on trial because he was accused of perverting the nation, encouraging people not to pay their taxes. And Luke even drags Herod into the scene for a moment, who appears just long enough to hand Jesus back to Pilate. But it is John's Gospel that we read this morning that exalts this encounter into a more dramatic, philosophical, and theological scene. Reza Aslan, who wrote the book The Zealot, who we had here, talks about that encounter in its historical context. He says, as governor, Pilate's chief responsibility in Jerusalem is to maintain order on behalf of the emperor. The only reason a poor Jewish peasant and a day laborer would be brought before him is if he had jeopardized that order. Otherwise, there would be no hearing, no questions asked, no need for a defense. Pilate, as histories reveal, was not one for trials. In his 10 years of governor over Jerusalem, he had sent thousands upon thousands to the cross with a simple scratch of his reed pen on a slip of papyrus. The notion that he would even be in the same room as Jesus, let alone deign him to grant him a child, beggars the imagination. Either the threat posed by Jesus to the stability of Jerusalem is so great that he is only one of a handful of Jews to have the opportunity to stand before Pilate and answer for his alleged crimes, or else the so-called trial before Pilate is a fabrication. Now, as Aslan points out, there is no reason to doubt the historical veracity of Pilate. In fact, in 1971, in an archaeological dig, they found what is now called the Pilate Stone. Etched on this stone are some of the acts of Pilate. But the actual conversation that Jesus and Pilate had may or may not have happened. May not have happened at all the way John records it. But what's important here is that it has been left for us. It's been left for us to read. It made it into the canon for some reason, and that alone is enough for us to mine its depths. Now, Pilate is often considered a villain, or at least weak-willed, is he not? But not by everyone. The Orthodox Coptic Church in Ethiopia celebrates Pilate as a martyr. In fact, they have a feast day for him. They believe that Pilate, later in his life, so transformed by his encounter with Jesus, converted to Christianity, and then was martyred for it. So why am I spending so much time on Pilate here? Because he provides a wonderful mirror for self-reflection. In fact, in reality, it's Pilate who's on trial, not Jesus. If you read the account closely through a 21st century lens, Jesus sounds more like a therapist. right? Think about it. Are you the king of the Jews? Well, is that what you say? Others say that. Well, what do you feel? I testify to the truth. What about you? And Pilate, with all his defenses intact, finally says, what is truth? It was a legitimate question then, as it is now. And of course, in our day and age, it takes on a profound meaning, does it not? In this age of 24/7 information, the endless news cycles, in this day of alternative facts and fake news and internet trolls affecting even our elections, asking what is true is a daily task. Discerning what to believe, what source to trust, what is authentic, can be exhausting. I used to say, you can make the Bible say anything you want. Now I say you can make the internet say anything you want it to say. When my daughter was young, she was asked in school, her class was asked, how do we know dinosaurs exist? She got called on, she said, because they made a movie about it. What is truth? In John's account, Pilate goes against his own truth, his own knowing. He knew Jesus was not guilty of the accusations leveled against him, and he knew he certainly was not worthy of execution. So why did he cave? Why did he ignore what he knew intuitively? Well, maybe he wanted to be reelected. Actually, he was appointed, but you get my point. Maybe he felt powerless. He surely was swayed by the crowd and the mob mentality that was happening. He also let it be their problem, right? Now, who's the there? Let's take a quick aside for a moment. The texts say the Jews, it was really the Judeans. This text, among many in the gospel accounts, has been used to accuse the Jews of killing Jesus. That has been a Christian myth for millennia and has been one of the main roots of anti-Semitism out of the Christian church. You can find it all over the Christian tradition. But I want to be clear historically that when we're saying this, there were all kinds of different sects of Jews in that time. This was talking about a particular group called the Judeans. And we have done a great disservice to the veracity of history to play at all into any myth that the Jews are responsible for the death of Jesus. Are you with me? Can we hear that clearly, and can we debunk that whenever we hear it? Because I still hear it to this day. He let it be their problem. And lastly, he didn't have the moral imagination to do anything different. I heard this week, if you don't have a moral imagination, you are living inside someone else's. Pilate was living inside the moral or immoral imagination of the Roman Empire, a brute empire based on the hierarchy of human value, based on the bottom line notion that might makes right. Pilate is a mirror to me, a mirror to us, because sometimes we give ourselves an out with, what is truth? What's true? We use the same rationalizations, and we opt out of reimagining what could be because we are caught in the imagination of our own empire, in the bottom lines of our own empire. This week there was another shooting in San Francisco. A 19-year-old young man named Jesus Delgado was shot by the San Francisco police with a barrage of bullets. It was caught on video. What is true? Did he have a gun? Were the police in danger? Well, if you are part of the police who have witnessed a number of their colleagues across the country killed so far in 2018, whose lives are threatened, you think about it one way. If you're part of a community who is shot at, and killed disproportionately on a pretty regular basis, you think of it another way, right? What is true? And since it becomes complicated very quickly, we step away and wash our hands of it, letting others deal. We'll let them protest. We'll let them be in the streets. You know, we see this in religion as well. We who are post-liberal Christians, we accept a I can't say it. Thank you. Plurality of truths. Ooh, that hour really has affected me. Right? We don't hold truth with a capital T, do we? Jesus is not the way, Jesus is a way. I think that's right. I think that's good. But in so doing, we opt out of the Christian dialogue and let others, those with the capital T, take up the airspace. In order to do the work of peace and justice, we, unlike Pilate, have to be willing to kind of interrogate our own lives. We've looked this Lent at the examined life. We've looked at the role that loss plays in our life, the kind of legacy that we want to leave. We've looked at how our failures help shape who we are in profound ways. And we also need to look at our own truth, because what the truth looks like depends on where we stand. And it's very easy to distance ourselves from other people's truths and only stay in our own. After all, we all know that we spend far too much time, each of us, in our own little echo chambers, siloed from other echo chambers. And we wonder why we can't have civic discourse, an authentic dialogue that makes a difference, dialogue on which our democracy is based. I read an essay this week, and in that essay it said, "The church's ability to be relevant and helpful in moments of social upheaval depends on our commitment to be a practicing and reflective church. We must be willing to lean into uncommon encounters that may disrupt our prior assumptions. We have to be willing to hear truths that are different than ours. And we have to be willing to authentically ask the question, what is the story of self, and how does that shape how I look at the world? What is that story of us, and what common values can we share? And what is the story of now? What's our opportunity in this moment and in this time?" The poem by Dietrich Bonhoeffer that you heard this morning, "Who Am I?" He was interrogating himself, even as he stood trial. He was part of the resistance movement in Germany, of the confessing church. The confessing church broke away from the mainline German Protestantism during Nazi Germany. And just think for a moment, the number of Protestants in Germany in 1935 were 45 million. The number of German population was 65 million. That means that almost 3/4 of Germany was Protestant Christian. Are you starting to follow me? There were 18,000 clergy people, and there were only 3,000 clergy who were in any way part of the confessing church. A confessing church that stood up to the Third Reich. That's quite an indictment. I'll just take it as clergy. That's quite an indictment. Bonhoeffer chose not to live inside the imagination of the Third Reich, but crafted a different moral imagination, and he paid for it along with others with his life. So truth is larger than any one truth, but starting with our own truth is a good place to begin. How does your starting place help you see or blind you to the truth of others? And I guess at the end of the day, the real question for me and for you is, are we willing to have our truth challenged? I like to think I'm right. What about you? Jesus says to Pilate, "Everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice." So maybe truth isn't as much a concept as it is a relationship. So I invite you to imagine Jesus as your therapist. Imagine him asking you questions. Imagine responding to those questions. And you don't know where you'll come out, because as Flannery O'Connor says, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you odd. It made Jesus odd, but we follow him anyway, right? Right? Amen.